All right, then. This is going to be part four, final part of the San Francisco series from this visit to San Francisco, anyhow. I think there's 29 pictures in this one, 20 or 27 in the other ones, and it's just wound up where there were 29 in this part four. So let's go. All right. So in this picture, I believe I'm back at Haight Ashbury. There's this is just a side street. It says something Emporium on the top left there, and it's just a brightly painted facade or wall. And those little hearts on the sidewalk, I think, have the names of some notable, colorful 60s characters who probably were there at one time. The only one I can really make out from here is that bottom right one, and the greenish heart is a wavy gravy. Or he was a guy that traveled around colleges and stuff. I remember in the late 70s, early 80s, he came to the University of Texas. So even way after the heyday of the 60s had come and gone, he was still going around and giving street lectures and stuff like that. And I don't know what all those other hearts say, but yeah, just like you always see, you can see something like that in any city. But this wall painting is in Haight Ashbury, where stuff like that would be more expected or known for. All right, this was inside the Golden Gate Park, the entrance to the Japanese gardens, which are contained within the much bigger Golden Gate Park. There was a entrance fee to get in there, so you're in the park for free, and then there's these little areas that you have to pay to go into these special areas. And I can't remember all of it. I think the botanical gardens you had to pay to go further into, and the Japanese gardens here. So, and I don't know, it's something like, $25 to walk through that little pagoda there into that part of the park, which just happens to have some Japanese landscaping done. I did go in, and then you go in there too, and it's kind of like, okay, this is great, but I could have just got a picture of the pagoda and, said I was there, and would have been much the same difference. But it's nice. Most of these, I don't know, San Diego had a big Japanese gardens inside Balboa Park. And LA, I don't know if they have any Japanese gardens. But for San Francisco, a much smaller city, to have a Japanese garden within a park, it's amazing to me that San Francisco even has a park as big as Golden Gate Park. As I've said before, there's just not that much room there. But but it's great. They have a huge park. The Golden Gate Park is probably the most famous park in the country. It's probably Central Park in New York. It's got to be at least that big or larger. And then, of course, Balboa Park in San Diego is the largest city park in the whole country, and hardly anybody knows that. But the Golden Gate Park is kind of like Central Park in New York, because it's this long straight line, neatly regulated between some streets, and instead of being wide and big like Balboa Park in San Diego, it's like more narrow and long, kind of like Central Park is in New York. So it's designed similarly to Central Park, but the size of Golden Gate Park in San Francisco exceeds or rivals that of Central Park in New York City. There is a weird-looking bridge inside the Japanese gardens. Inside the Japanese gardens, which are within Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, and within that, there's a bridge. And I didn't walk across that bridge because I thought it'd be kind of hard to go up it, and then you have to be real careful going down it. That looks like something you could get hurt on. to me anyway. But in general, the Japanese gardens there were fine. Another shot within the Japanese gardens that is within Golden Gate Park, within the city of San Francisco. It's kind of nice. I mean, anywhere in Golden Gate Park you can go and sit and find peace and tranquility and elbow room, and not necessarily have to be around a lot of people like you do have to be almost every other square inch of that city. Set aside areas like this in any big city are very nice, a very good thing. But however, that being said, you go into a contained, specialized area within a big park like the Japanese gardens are, and then it's more crowded because people are going to that one little section. They might go to the park, Golden Gate Park in this instance, but they're going into the Golden Gate Park just so they can go into the Japanese gardens. And for a lot of people, that's their destination, really and truly. So so you run into probably more people in these little areas. So you pay to get into these specialized areas, and then there's a lot more people around you. It's like, well, why am I paying for that? I mean, from my point of view, that would be at cross purposes. And here's another picture of the Japanese gardens in Golden Gate Park, San Francisco. Little Serenity Pond type thing, and another one of those pagoda buildings in the distance, just like what was in the last picture. Let's let that sit there for a second. Not much more to say about it. I think if you'd walked uphill through some of those trees on the right, a pathway, you could have gone up to those buildings, but more than likely, for one reason or another, you wouldn't be able to have gone inside the buildings, because with as many people roaming around there, they'd probably go and, to tear off pieces of the building or something from as souvenirs or something. Who knows? Okay, so this is when things started to get weird in Golden Gate Park. There's a big walkway, that road you can see, concourse, and no cars, even though it's a big paved road, no cars are allowed to drive on that part, I don't think. The shuttle bus thing that could take you around the park, that you could catch outside the park, it could drive on that paved road. So it's basically a big wide, and it's pretty wide, a big wide paved road where just like rollerbladers, skateboarders, bicyclists, and pedestrians are allowed on there. Even though there's a sidewalk you can see over there on the grass, mostly or all of that road is set aside to non-vehicular traffic. But apart from that, you have these weird sculptures in here. This is and it's a series of sculptures. There's a few of them that are like that. So this is a bunny, presumably a bunny woman and a dog man, both carrying what I don't know. They're supposed to be briefcases, I guess. It doesn't look like briefcases. It looks more like, military, artillery gear or something. But that just sitting there, smack dab in the middle of the road. I think it's sort of near the botanical garden area, and it just jumped out at me when I saw those from afar. When I was walking down that road, I was like, "What is that?" And the closer and closer I got to it, the weirder and weirder it became. Okay, this is another example of that architecture. Now, there's a painted ground there. Road. I think you see that cement ball in like the middle left. That's usually something they'll put in the road like that to prevent, cars from being able to drive on there. So that goes back to my assumption that that's a non-vehicular roadways, perhaps. Now this is it looks like that's an inflatable, like silver flamingo, but it couldn't be. It wouldn't be sturdy enough for those statues. So it's probably made out of metal or something. And then there's that same rabbit woman and dog man, but they're riding this flamingo in the middle of the road in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. That's another part of this rabbit and dog sculpture series. And this picture is a little dark, but it's another part of that series. As you can see right there in the middle of the road, a table with a bottle of wine, and it's the rabbit woman and the dog man. I can't even really see what she's doing, but he's mixing something up. Probably Alpo or dog food or something. And he expects that rabbit to eat it with him. She's giving him the fish eye. You can see it's like, I'm not eating that crap. Are you crazy? Said, oh, but look, I got a bottle of wine. Oh, okay, it's all good then. Yeah. And then off on the right, on the right side of this picture, you see that white building. That is the part of the botanical garden, which has the flowers in it, which I think I had some pictures in one of my other parts of the series. So that's also one of the stops for the tram thing, that the citywide transportation bus. See, you can see all those people in the background walking. There's a bicycle and people on foot. So that points more toward that being non-vehicular, only for pedestrians or two-wheelers or maybe the occasional skateboard. And then putting the statues in the middle of the street would impede any kind of cars from driving on it too, right? That's quite unique though. And here's inside that botanical garden building I showed in the last picture. It's not super huge. I mean, most of the size is upwards toward those the glass atrium ceiling thing that's letting in the natural light, and but there's a lot of stuff in there. There's lots of plants, and you can walk all around it. And there's like two wings that you can go to, and then there's benches in there you can sit in. So you could be inside the park, and then you can go in there, and of course, that's one of those spots where more people would migrate to. But I was able to sit on a bench and take out all my, camera equipment and set it up and walk around and take pictures. No one sat on the bench I was on. I was right by a fountain that's inside of there too, and a bunch of kids ran up to the fountain and were splashing around in it with their hands. That was all right. But I'm sure I may or may not have more pictures of this atrium, but it is nice. If you're inside Golden Gate Park, it's nice to go into, but I do believe you have to pay an extra admission to get in there. This is outside the botanical gardens. I'm shooting this back from the road, I think. And if you're old enough, you remember, before kids were immersed in electronics for all their entertainment, we used to have these. Remember these? These little blocks, letter blocks. You'd build and write out words. Well, this one is made to look like those old blocks, as they're very large. And there's LOVE, love. And a couple of them are actually, they're all to some degree sunk into the actual ground. So I guess they, don't go anywhere or blow around or anything. In the background, there's some statue of some guy and some people sitting on it, but I didn't go over there. I have no idea who that is a statue of. But at this point, I'd already been in the park, and I was sitting at one of the stops for the shuttle bus. It stops at the Botanical Gardens. So I got a picture of that. Then the sun was beaming pretty hard that day. I think after that day, I went back to the hostel where I was staying and immediately ordered one of them wide brim, sun hats, like gardening hat type things. And that saved my butt from the sun after that. And it also came in very handy in San Diego the next year. Highly recommended if you're going to be going to California cities in the summer when there's sun out. Not that it's as hot as where I live normally, but the UV, because of what's happened to the ozone layer, partially at least, the UV is pretty high, even if it's not necessarily super hot. So you should have something covering your head. Even wear suntan lotion in some cases, even when you're just walking around a park or something like this. Okay, this is when I was at the Legion of Honor area. It's inside the Palisades, which is the big park area. It used to be a military base, I think, that you would pretty much have to go through to get to the beginning of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a huge park area with all these weird, buildings everywhere. You don't know what they're for. Are they government buildings? Are they schools? It's not where people live, though. I believe it's called the Palisades. If you look on a map of San Francisco, just where the Golden Gate Bridge starts in the San Francisco side, you see this big wooded, parky kind of area, and whatever that's called, that's what it is. There is some stuff in there though you can go do, and the Legion of Honor, the Legion of Honor Museum. There's a lot of famous paintings and stuff, so I was going there to see the paintings, and there's one city, and it's kind of weird. It's like hard to get to if you weren't driving, but there was one city bus that went all through the Palisades area there, up a hill, and then dropped you off right in the parking lot. And but off to the side of the parking lot area was this. This is actually a Holocaust memorial. And you had to walk up to it. You couldn't see it, and you had to look down over this ledge, and then bam, that's what you saw. I did at some point walk down there, but it's all these statues of these, like, emaciated bodies, and then there's one, you can't really see it well, but that one that's standing up, that's like two posts, and there's barbed wire across it, and that particular one is like, he's still alive, and he's staring out forlornly through the barbed wire. So it's interesting. It's like it's almost like action art about a horrible topic, the Holocaust. But it's just there in the parking lot of a museum inside that big wooded area. You can see the water in the background through the trees. So this is fairly close to the bay also. And here, from that same parking lot, that is the entrance to the Legion of Honor. And you got to walk up there and go through those columns, and then in this big open courtyard thing, and then you actually go inside the place. I almost thought it was so weird to find this place. How do you get here? That I almost didn't go. I'm glad I did. But when I found that bus that took you right up to the roundabout thing where the parking lot was, says, oh well, great. That was what I did fully for one morning. I got there right when they opened, probably. So it's a nice thing inside of another park in San Francisco. Still amazes me that a city that size could even have something that big that's on its own piece of land in a city that size. But there it is. This is inside the Legion of Honor Museum. Lots of known painters and unknown too, or more little known than this one. There's Matisse's in there, Monet's, it's all kinds of stuff. I got a lot of pictures of the paintings with the little information plaque on the wall, but I was only going to show, probably this is the only painting I showed in this series. This is a Vincent van Gogh, a tiny little thing. It's called Shelter on Montmartre. Montmartre, of course, being the island that's in the middle of Paris where all the artists and stuff used to live. Like, you got the city of Paris and the Seine River going through it, and on this little island in the middle of the river was this little artist community, and every artist back then, always had to go and live there like a bohemian, as part of the ritual of being an artist. This particular painting was done in 1887. It must be a view of the Eiffel Tower from Montmartre, and it says Van Gogh's life 1853 to 1890, so this would have been made 3 years before he died. presumably by canceling himself. That's the way you have to say it on YouTube. But actually, the new book came out a few years ago about Van Gogh, where they re-examined the whole way that he died, and there was a lot of evidence showing that he didn't actually cancel himself. It was still a gunshot wound, but inflicted accidentally by these kids or teenagers who he had come across doing something, and there was like a little scuffle, and the thing went off accidentally, and then the kid, the main teenager who was involved in it, was like shuffled off out of town to some private school afterwards to avoid a scandal, but Van Gogh still, died from it, because, some people try to come up with other explanations besides people canceling themselves, because maybe they just don't like, the idea, they don't like the story to end that way. I don't know. But that's an actual Van Gogh. I've seen many Van Goghs around the world. Any town or city that I wind up being in, I'll research it, if there's a Van Gogh there, and then they have other paintings too, or even if there's only just a Van Gogh and nothing else, I'll usually make a special trip to that museum just to see that. This says inside the Legion of Honor Museum 2. It's pretty big. This is just one thing you walk by, and it's like I don't know if it's the actual items. It could be, but it's a like a recreation of a, French, Louis XIV era room, like you might see in the Palace of Versailles that Louis XIV built outside of Paris. But it's nice. There's other like rooms they have, remodeled like this that have old furniture and stuff from the old. This would be pre-Victorian era. I didn't want to call it Victorian era because it's before that even. This kind of architecture. Now, if you went to the Versailles in France, you'd see an entire huge giant, 400-room palace or something. It was all pretty much decorated like this. This is just a one-room recreation or example of that. This is a statue. There is one wing of that museum that we're talking about now. Was just dedicated to the sculptor Rodin. He's the one who did the famous, thinker statue, and also the statue of the man and the woman like embraced kissing, done in bronze or something. This is a trio Greek type thing. I'm not sure why they have a whole section dedicated to Rodin in this particular museum. And it was hard to tell whether these were, cast recreations of originals or if they were the original Rodin sculptures or not. Because I think it's known about Rodin is that he was putting out so much sculptures because he was fairly well known in his lifetime that he was getting students and apprentices to he'd give them like a guide or a cast, and they were pumping these things out. So I think it's sort of hard to attribute which ones were actually made by the hand of Rodin and not an apprentice or something. So maybe trying to determine if it was an original or not is moot, because if a lot of his stuff was done by apprentices, but still under his guise, they still would usually consider that to be an original. I just don't know what this particular museum wound up getting. So here's that aforementioned statue. Everybody's seen this pretty much. Rodin, it's called The Kiss. It's famously known as The Kiss. Whether that's the original or not, I don't know. I mean, Rodin, I don't even know what nationality he was, probably French. And you would think they'd have the original of this, like in the Louvre or something in Paris. But there's a possibility that could be the original here in San Francisco. I don't know. This was used famously. Monty Python's Flying Circus, the BBC British television series in the early 60s. If you saw the opening animated credits of Monty Python's Flying Circus, you see this statue, but they made like a joke where the man's right hand holding the woman's hips, she has holes in her hip, and he's blowing into her mouth, and he's doing the holes like she's a flute. It makes like this flute music. So the Monty Python people turn that statue into like a human flute type joke, which is kind of clever. It looks like he's fingering a flute on her hip, right? Or could be, if you had an imagination, which Monty Python people certainly did, big time. Okay, I had to get a picture of that. Wish I knew for sure if it was the original or not. I could research it, but so could you. Another example of one of the redecorated rooms in that museum. This was really nice, wood paneling walls, chairs, and the whatever that is on the tables, the china and stuff. And then there's some information, those things, and there's a rope going across. You don't go in past the rope. And then those little black pillar things have information about the pieces. That picture is sad. I mean, how blurry it is, everything. I haven't even mentioned in this video, but yes, this part 4 was also done with phone photography. Once I get through the San Francisco series, and then my 4-part Los Angeles series coming up, which is also done on a phone, I'll never ever again be putting phone footage up. And I'll probably be putting footage up of these cities again that I've returned to, but taking better photography with my good camera. If this was in a whole other area of San Francisco, I think I was waiting for it to be time to take my little charter boat cruise thing through the San Francisco Bay. And right across from where you catch, where the little, marina is, where all the boats are. I mentioned those boats in another video, how you could take those instead of the big, hook them by the nose chartered cruises things, which cost 3 times more. But this is I had to take a picture of this. It's a dispensary, of course. Marijuana is legal in California, and you go to a place called a dispensary to buy pot, and this place was right by the water. It's a dispensary. It's called Seaweed. I thought that was just hilarious. There's a little marijuana leaf on the side, and then seaweed. And up above that, I never noticed this, there was a seafood buffet. So whether there's a seafood they caught in the bay or not fresh is debatable, but all-you-can-eat buffet, $33. I don't eat fish anymore, so otherwise I would have been there. But see, you can go down to a dispensary, buy some pot, walk out by the water, smoke a joint or something, and go like, God, that pot really made me hungry. Look, let's go up there and eat the all-you-can-eat fish buffet. Problem solved. This is a view from the top of the deck before you go down inside of the charter boat I got on. It was $20, and he took you on a full 45, 50-minute bay tour. And there were some people on there. I mean, I wasn't the only one. But instead of just a little ways away from this, there's these bigger docks that have these big, huge, giant, almost like cruise ship size, boats. Cost $40 or $50, and those are just herded with people. I mean, a line through these, dividing ropes to get into it. The people who are in the know walk a little bit down, go to this marina, get on one of these little boats. They only run a few days a week, but only $20. And the guy even gives you a little, on the PA system, tells you some stuff. So there is some guidance to the tour. And you go down this little ladder and you're on the boat. I just now realized that the name of that boat was Chucky's Pride. I didn't even really notice that when I was on it. But that's kind of creepy, isn't that little Chucky dog, in the horror movie or something? Bride of Chucky and all that stuff. Child's Play. That was the original movie, I think. You get on that boat and that little Chucky, you look up and that little Chucky doll's head turns around and you see that he's driving. It's like, oh my God, we're never going to make it home. Okay, here's what I would call boilerplate photography. You know, nothing exciting. You're on a boat. You got to get a picture. That's back toward the city. I think that's back toward I don't know, I can't say for sure, but on the left middle are those long boathouse looking buildings, which appear to be the one, just like the ones that are close to where my hostel was. So this could have been near my because where I got the boat was, past where the hostel is, and if you're going toward the Golden Gate Bridge, I would have had to have passed where my hostel was. It was kind of cool. Oh, look, I can see my hostel up on the hill, because that hostel there is right on the water, too. Highly recommended hostel, the Fort Mason Hosteling International location. And they have another location that's downtown, but the one that's on Fort Mason, it's on federal land, so there's no tax. So whatever you pay per night, the approximately $40 per night, there's no tax. So if you stay at the one that's downtown, you'll have an extra $150 or something like that, or $70 to $100 added on for a city and or state tax. Whereas the Fort Mason one, same price per night, maybe even a little lower, but no tax. So and you're right there by the Golden Gate Bridge in Alcatraz. So I haven't. I'm sure the one in downtown San Francisco is nice, but I'd recommend the Fort Mason because of location, as they say, and at least $100 cheaper for your stay. Yeah. So here I'm on the boat, still obviously, and you're starting to go underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. So when I was there, I was on top of that bridge, and this day I was underneath the bridge. The only way to get underneath the bridge, of course, is a boat. So that's got kind of a nice shot. You're going he went under the bridge, went out into the bay a little bit, like you're going to open sea. And he turned around, went back under the bridge, and then he, stepped on the gas, started heading toward Alcatraz Island, which is, of course, to the right. In this picture, you can't see it right now. But nice sunny day. And I guess on the other side there, that's what they call Marin County, and you're out of San Francisco officially then, and into a whole going in toward Northern California. Okay, this is on the other side of the bridge, ocean side of the bridge. We've now gone under the bridge, and I turned back and got a picture. That sun glare on the top right, I don't know, some people would say that might add a nice effect, but I think it's too much glare. Like I said, another example of a phone photography not really being able to keep up. But that's kind of cool. I mean, when you see that, when you're on the bridge, it's you get an idea of the immensity of it. When you're underneath of it like that, I think you get even more of a sense of the immensity of this bridge. It's just how big it is. Not the biggest bridge in the world. It was when it was built. I think now it's only like the seventh largest in the world. There's some bridges they built in China or somewhere like that. They're like 3 times as long or something now. Here's on the boat. I spun back there. I got a picture of the skyline of downtown San Francisco. It's pretty nice. Came out pretty good. And then, of course, you see all the water there, too. The colors are flattering in that picture. The water looks good, and the city stands out, and then you got the blue sky, everything as a backdrop. But yeah, you heard about the weather of California. It really is true. I've been to 3 different trips out there so far, and the weather's always good. Although I will admit, when I was in San Diego, my last trip, the most recent trip, it rained for a couple of days, and I was staying in a hostel. It was right smack dab downtown in the Gaslamp Quarter, and I have to say it was really cool and nice to have some rain and wet streets and a little bit of overcast or something for a couple of days instead of that would be my only complaint, for lack of a better word, of California on the West Coast, is that the weather's nice almost too much, if you can believe that, if I'm allowed to say that. It's like Okay, well, it was my 100th consecutive, sunny and mild day, and without the seasons. I mean, I don't care if there's no seasons. You can take your, minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit blizzards in Chicago and run with it. I don't think I'd want to. I love the snow, but I wouldn't want to go through all that for weeks on end. I'd rather go through this, what you see in this picture, I'd much rather go through that for weeks on end than, say, a blizzard, right? What's great about California, though, you want some snow, you want to break it up a little, you just drive in Northern California or into even northern Arizona or into New Mexico, not New Mexico, but into Nevada, and because New Mexico's further east. You go into some of the surrounding states up into the mountains there, and you can run into snow. Like you could be in this 80-degree weather in San Francisco, and in a 4-hour drive, you could be in Northern California and be in the snow. Go skiing if you wanted to, and during the winter time. I don't think you can ski year round, but because there are seasons in California and Oregon and places like that, if you just if you go at the right time, I guess, and follow the seasons themselves. The Rock. That's what it's known as, Alcatraz. Now this is coming from the back side of it, which you cannot really see from San Francisco. The boat went around the back of it, and there's a little disembarkation area on the back of it on the other side of that tower smokestack thing going up, where those big tour boats, if you pay to go on the whole full Alcatraz thing, that's where they drop you off. And it was just thronged with people. I mean, all these people get on those big boats, they go there, and they all get off there, and they all have to sit there in this one little area in a herd until they let a certain amount of them go into the actual jail part. They used to have tours. You get at tours where you go in there, you can pay, and it costs money. You pay even more, and they take you into these bottom cell areas. And they used to, back a long time ago, I don't think they do this anymore, have overnights where you pay this hefty sum probably, get a boat out there, and you spend the night in the cells. Remember, this is where, the whole story. I mean, Al Capone was there, The Birdman of Alcatraz, which is a great movie with Burt Lancaster, by the way, old school movie. And then, of course, Escape from Alcatraz with Clint Eastwood. It was all about the three guys who successfully escaped from there. And there's some graffiti on one of the those buildings in the left. In 1970, I think it was, some an Indian tribe, Indian Nation protest tribe or something, claiming, protesting about the United States having taken their land, 100, 150 years before that. They occupied that whole island. The Alcatraz prison was closed down in like 1965, I think, 66, somewhere early to mid-60s. But about 5 years after that, though, this Indian tribe took over that land, and they stayed there for several months, like negotiating, because it was officially federal land, I believe. They were negotiating with some, I don't know what it all is they negotiated. AIM was the group I was trying to think of. AIM, AIM, American Indian Movement. They had done some protests and taken over some stuff in the plains of the United States, and I don't know if it was that group that was involved in taking over Alcatraz, but some group actually did. It was big news at the time. This is coming along the back part. You can see that white building. It says Indian Land, 1970. That's when the Indian people had taken over, and they painted over that. Now those used to be old barracks for the guards that lived on it when it was a functioning prison up there on the hill. The brown-looking building, that was the actual prison. And I think the guy who was on the boat, giving information, that building on the left near the bottom, which doesn't have a roof on it, those were more barracks, or it was a recreation hall for the people who lived there. I don't think the guards probably had family members who were living there, but But as you can see, if someone were able to break out of the big prison up there, and a lot of people tried and failed, and they always tried to say there's no way you can escape because you get into the water of San Francisco Bay, you're just going to get swept under the Golden Gate Bridge and go out to sea. But those three guys that supposedly really did it, you can see if you can get out of the main prison, you really, it's not a very big island, but anywhere you could get around one of these buildings, go down that hill or something like that and just get to the water. Once you're in the water on a little boat, you've officially escaped the prison and you're not on the island anymore. Then you're just merely a wanted fugitive. Those three guys have escaped apparently. Yeah, swimming apparently is out of the question to get out of there, but they'd made like a little boat by cementing rubber rain jackets and stuff together, which they then inflated at the edge of the water and then got in. They had some makeshift paddles. They paddled to a nearby island, Angel Island or something like that, because that's where they found the boat. But they never did find the people. If they had died, it means they never found the bodies. If they escaped, they never recaught them. They probably went to another country. All right, here we go. And so after a long day of sightseeing, I decided I needed a nap. So I laid out my little pad thing, covered myself in a blanket, put my little stroller off to the side there with my backpack and stuff in it. Had me a nice little 1.5, 2 hour nap right there on the streets of San Francisco. But no, I'm just kidding. That was one of many situations you run into in San Francisco and any other big city unfortunately, of a homeless person. That person was pretty wrapped up pretty well. It was just right in the middle of the day. I mean, this would have been noon, lunchtime, 1, 2 o'clock. Wait, I actually have not that it matters, but I have the time on here of being 4:21 p.m. So this guy went to bed early for the night, I guess. And when you leave the area where I was coming from, I think I was walking because there's a Trader Joe's that was in that area, and then jump on a bus and go back to my hostel. But I passed that and got a picture of it. Maybe I shouldn't be taking pictures of stuff like that, but it's right there. When you are using a phone for photography, you take more superfluous pictures because right there is pull out my phone, take a picture. Whereas when you're using a camera, you might have to stop, take it out of the camera bag, even put the lens on. You're taking more purposeful photography when you're using a camera, more incidental and superfluous photography when you're using a phone. This is what I've come to learn. So this is back at the far end again of Golden Gate Park. I was over by a beach, and I walked across the street from the beach and into the back entrance of Golden Gate Park. A long way from the main entrance, which is on the other side, which is actually inside the city. And then there again are the Wilhelmina Gardens. And in one of my other parts of this series, I had pictures of that windmill from a distance. Now that's quite close up. And you can go down in there, and there's always flowers. There's even more flowers on the right you can't see in this picture. But that's one of the windmills, and I still don't know the story behind it. This whole section of the park was commissioned or dedicated to Queen Wilhelmina of Holland, and I don't really know what her connection to a park in San Francisco was, but that's what it's called, Wilhelmina Gardens, named after some Queen Wilhelmina who was from the Low Country, as they refer to Holland and countries around there in Europe. But that's interesting. You can be in the big park, and you got the Japanese gardens, you got the botanical gardens, and you've got this little nature trail thing you can walk in. Then you could, if you want to go all the way through the park, to the very end, then you can run into that. This was probably on or near my last day there, and I found an Indian restaurant, which was a short bus ride away from the hostel. And I went and ate at the Indian restaurant. It was quite good. Do not know the name of it, so I could not give them a plug or recommend it. All I can say, it was in the north part of San Francisco. And then I'm walking back toward the bus, and I ran into this little, store Wizards and Wands. And then there was a door, and I think it was like a Sunday, so I didn't think it was going to be in there, but it was open, and I stuck my head in there, and he went down this little passageway, and then he walked into this amazing room, and it had all this stuff in it hanging down, and there was this woman, these people sitting in chairs, and there was some woman. She was either dressed up like a witch or a wizardress, or something like that, and was, waving her arms around, talking to him. I don't know if she was doing a spell, or if she was giving a lecture about, wizard and warlock type stuff. I don't know. I sat there for a couple minutes and listened to her, but couldn't really tell because it was obviously some off-hours function thing, and they just left the front door open, and I wasn't necessarily supposed to be there, so I left. But interesting, there's all kinds of weird little shops like that, which is cool because like where I live in Austin, there still are, but there used to be a lot more weird little shops like that. Well, San Francisco still got tons of stuff. They've still got their eclectic stuff from all the way back in the 60s and beyond, still going on and intact. I'm sure they've lost a lot too with gentrification and corporate takeover of pieces of land and stuff, but they still have a lot more of it left than, say, the trendy and hip place where I've been living for several years now. All right, and here, this is the day I was leaving. I was getting the Greyhound bus out of there. I'll never take Greyhound out to California again. And I just haven't left. Amtrak has been my way to go 2 out of 3 times. Believe it or not, the bus will get you out there and home as quickly as the train will, even quicker in some cases. But the bus is miserable if it's even 3/4 full, and it usually is. The train has a lot more room in it, a lot more leg room too, of course. But this is the weird-looking spongy building thing I had in some of my other parts of the series, but that's just a concourse inside. You're sitting there. Little waiting area. This was like a Sunday, I believe, and there were still like a couple little coffee shops open. So we'll never get a coffee. That's also the same building that has the garden on the top floor. You walk around, elevated garden looking over the city. But I didn't go back up there, I don't think. I probably had a few hours to kill before I got on the bus, and then you had to take the escalator up into one of those concourses inside the little spongy area, and then get the bus, which eventually started, taking you out of town. But that was just a random picture I got of the transit center. It's a big transportation, connection center for different forms of transportation. But the train, no trains can go into San Francisco. They're in the room. Anything having to do with the train, you got to get from here across the Bay Bridge in Oakland, and then you can get on a train if you're doing Amtrak. But I was doing Greyhound here, so this is just where the Greyhound trip started. It also went across the Bay Bridge, but then started heading to California on a bus. Actually, it went all the way down to L.A., and you were there at night. Then you had to sit there outside Union Station in L.A., for an hour and a half, thronged to all these different groups of people waiting for different buses. And when you finally got on that bus, midnight or something crazy like that, then you were on your way east officially. And another bad thing about riding the bus, Greyhound, is that you're going to get dumped off in Union Station in L.A., like a cattle call with no facilities or anywhere to go. You go inside Union Station, try and find the bathroom in there. You lose your little place in line. It's just a mess. I will never, ever do the Greyhound bus for these trips again, but I've already said that, haven't I? Anyway, that concludes part 4 of the San Francisco photography series. It also concludes the San Francisco photography series itself. Starting next week at the latest, I'm going to do a 4-part Los Angeles phone photography again of all parts near and wide in the Los Angeles area. That was the trip I was on before 1 year before the San Francisco trip. So thank you for watching, and more to come.